Two of my really good friends and I played a game when we were kids. I guess it may seem a little twisted to some people, but I guess kids don't really care about these sorts of things. It was called the grave game. We would go to the local cemetery and play it at night. It had to be played at night as it made the game scarier. The rules were simple. More than 2 people had to play. The finder closes their eyes and counts to 30. The hiders run and hide behind a gravestone. The players who are hiding have to call out the name on the gravestone, and the finder has to find them by locating that grave. If the finder asks for a clue, the hiders have to say the name on a nearby gravestone. It's kind of like a really messed up hide and seek. One very cold and foggy night, we entered the cemetery to play the grave game. This was the perfect night for the grave game. The ground was covered in a slow-moving thick mist, covered by dead grass. Cobwebs moved along the cemetery gates, giving a floating effect in the low winds. My friend Bobby closed his eyes and started to count. There were only 3 of us playing at night, me, my friends Bobby and Jane. Jane and I ran through the cemetery picking a gravestone with the name Henry Colton. 30 seconds, name, yelled Bobby. Henry Colton, Jane and I yelled from afar. Bobby started to move along the cemetery aisles. Jane and I were giggling behind Henry Colton's gravestone. We were freezing cold, but we really didn't care. We were having so much fun. I could see something strange moving through the cemetery in front of us. It was bright. It looked like a woman wearing a long dress. She was covered in a bright white light. It was blinding to look at. I tapped Jane's shoulder and pointed at the woman. We both stared at her as she walked slowly through the cemetery before quickly vanishing. I don't need to tell you we were shocked at what we just saw. The wind started to pick up and I could feel it on the back of my neck. That seemed so odd because I was sitting in front of the gravestone. We both looked up only to see the woman staring towards us. She was leaning over the gravestone, hovering over us. Her face bony and thin, her eyes empty and white. She was whispering something to us over and over, but we were so scared we couldn't work it out. We jumped up and screamed and ran over to Bobby. We looked back and the woman was gone. Jane and I told Bobby what happened and he didn't believe us. The 3 of us walked over to the grave we were sitting at and tried to make sense of what had just happened. I looked down at the grave and then realised what the woman was saying. "Get off my husband's grave." The grave read, "Henry Colton, loving husband of Mary Colton." That was Mary Colton we saw, and she was not happy that we were sitting at her husband's grave. We never played that game again. In a way, I'm kind of glad this happened because it really changed us for the better. All 3 of us are still friends and hang out all the time. But one thing we'll never do again is play the grave game. Ever again. It's been 10 years. 10 long years. I can't forget it. It won't let me forget it. I want to tell you what happened, but it scares me to even talk about it. I just think it's time to tell someone. Tonight, it would have been 10 years to the day. I was 30 years old. My girlfriend and I had split up and things were really bad for me at the time. I only had casual work, so I wasn't making much money. Sleeping on the couch in the living room was becoming difficult, so I had to find a cheap place to live in as soon as possible. I'd seen a house for rent in the classifieds. It was cheap, really cheap, and located just outside of town. I'd written down the phone number on a small piece of chewing gum wrapper I'd scrunched up in my pocket. I called the number on the wrapper and an old woman picked up. She had a very husky voice and spoke in a very kind and caring manner. She explained to me that the house was her mother's and her mum had just passed away. The old woman then went on to say that she won't live in the home as it brings up too many memories. I didn't really know what she meant by that. I had made a time to go and see the house that day. The house was beautiful, a 2-story home with shuttered windows, hardwood floors and a fresh coat of paint. It was fully furnished with old vintage furniture and had a really good feel to it. I felt good. The price though, how is this place so cheap? I could easily afford it and that was saying a lot. I accepted the offer and in the next couple of days was fully moved in. The first day was great. The house just felt like it was my own. It was warm and comfortable and just had a really good feel to it. The sun shone through the windows, creating a bright and light feel to the home. What I didn't know was it was all about to change. That night I awoke. It was 11:30. I went downstairs to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of orange juice from the fridge and took a sip. The house didn't feel the same. It felt bad. It felt cold and dark. The air felt dry and a smell was permeating through the rooms, the smell of rotten meat. The worst thing was that I felt like I was being watched, not by one person, but by many. I looked in all directions. I couldn't see into the other rooms. It was so dark. "Hello," I said out aloud. Nothing. I felt stupid. What was I doing? I was just sleepy, I thought. I walked into the living room. It was very dark. I couldn't see much in front of me, and then I froze. Someone was standing right in front of me. I couldn't see them. It was so dark, but the smell, oh my God. The smell of rotten meat, it was so strong. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place. My phone was in my pocket. I slid my hand into my pocket to grab it and press the unlock button. I raised the phone quickly to the face of the person. A man smiled at me, his face rotten with maggots dripping from its socket. He smiled, a tooth-filled grin from his rotten skull. He laughed a low, deep laugh and grabbed my shoulder. I pushed off his hand and ran as fast as I could up the stairs, into the bedroom, closed the door behind me. I walked backwards, staring at the door, expecting him to burst in, but nothing. It was silent on the other side. I turned around to head towards the window to escape the house when I saw a woman crying on the bed. She had a black veil hiding her face. I was shaking. What is going on in this house? She was sobbing on the bed with her hands placed upon her face. "Hello," I said. She turned her head slowly towards me and lifted her veil. Dead. She was dead, the same as the man, the smell of rotten meat filling the room. She screamed a high-pitched scream and reached her arms towards me like she was trying to grab me. I panicked and ran towards the door. I opened the door to see the man laughing and smiling at me. I pushed past him and ran down the stairs. I turned on the living room light. Bodies. Bodies everywhere. Oh my God. The smell was overwhelming. They were all reaching out at me, screaming, laughing, moaning and crying. I was terrified. There were so many of them. Then the light flickered. It was almost blinding, like a flash, and suddenly they were all gone. I ran out the front door and onto the street and fell to my knees crying. Someone had run from the house across the road after hearing all the noise to help me. I gave them my ex-girlfriend's number and they had called her to come and pick me up. She came and collected me and let me stay at her house for the next couple of days. It was the next day. I had woken on the couch feeling so confused as to what happened. It seemed like a dream, a really bad dream. I still had the scrunched up piece of chewing gum wrapper with the lady's number. I grabbed it from my bag and called the old lady. The phone rang many times until she finally answered. I told her what I saw, the corpses, the smell, the house. I think the house was haunted, I said. She went quiet on the other end. "Hello," I said. Then a quiet laugh came through the phone. She was laughing. It got louder and louder and louder. It was a sinister and insidious laugh. Then the phone cut out. I tried calling back, but the line said it was disconnected. I never heard from her again, and since then my life has gotten back on track. I have a new full-time job, and my girlfriend and I are back together, and we're now happily married. But I can't forget. It's like the house won't let me forget. That one night will live with me forever. Deep into the darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing. That's a line from The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. That line always really stuck with me as someone who suffers with sleep paralysis. It's pretty bad at times, some nights worse than others, but one night was beyond scary. I saw something that night, something evil. I can only describe it in one word: demon. I'd climbed into bed. It was a rather cold night and the wind was howling quite strong outside, rattling my windows, creating an almost tapping sound. The bed was so warm compared to the freezing cold bedroom. I fell asleep fast and woke in a panic. I couldn't move. I tried to move my arms and legs, but nothing. This wasn't my first time with sleep paralysis, but it felt so different. A strong feeling came over me. The best way I could explain it is that I had a feeling that something was coming and was about to enter the bedroom. My eyes moved around quickly, panning the room. I could only slightly make some things out as it was quite dark. Then I heard it, the sound of something dragging across the floor. The feeling got stronger and the sound got louder. I could hear it dragging its body across the floor. I saw it as it poked its head through the doorway. It looked like a man, but extremely skinny and skeletal. He had long arms with stretched out fingers, dragging into the carpet, dragging his twisted body along the floor. Coming closer and closer towards the bed, I was sweating, my eyes were watering. My body lay still and my chest became tight. It was becoming hard to breathe. He slowly reached the bed and stretched his long fingers up, digging into the mattress, pulling his face above the edge of the mattress slowly. I now could see his face. 2 yellow eyes peered at me above a thin, bony nose. His skin was cracked and burnt, his ears pointed and bent. He had 2 small horns protruding from his skull, pointing back towards his neck. His head raised a little more as I could now see his sharp, pointed teeth, grinning at me through his cracked lips. His vile and evil smile painted across his face. He was breathing heavily as the air whistled from his mouth. He reached out and grabbed my arm, pulling me slowly off the bed. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move, I was helpless. His outstretched hand clutching my arm, dragging me with him, my body now halfway off the bed, when all of a sudden I could move again. My God, I could move again. I freed my arm, jumped off the bed and ran into the living room and switched on the lights. I turned around and looked into the bedroom. He was gone. Was it a dream? I just couldn't believe what had happened. It seemed so unreal. I looked down at my arm. Blood ran down my arm from a long scratch. It was real. I couldn't believe it. I sat up for the rest of the night. I couldn't get back to sleep. I never had sleep paralysis again, and I never saw that demon again. I wonder now what would have happened to me if he managed to drag me under the bed. I try not to think about it. I may not get sleep paralysis anymore, but one thing is for sure, I still can't shake that feeling like something is coming for me.